You've tuned into Heroes Wanted. I am your host, Joe Prim. The mission of this podcast is to equip fathers to abandon average and to find discipline, confidence, and purpose by uncovering the hero within. Boy, do I have a treat with you here in this episode. I had the opportunity to sit down and have a virtual conversation with the one and only Brian Fleming. I'll read you his bio here in a minute, but just let me tell you from my experience talking to him for a little over an hour, it was a real treat. A down-to-earth guy, a guy with a great sense of humor, and this is the bonus. This is the icing on the cake for me recording Heroes Wanted. The opportunity to speak with great men out there that have a purpose, that are living out a mission, that are out there serving a group or a purpose bigger than themselves is truly amazing. Through the years, I've had the opportunity to become good friends with some of those people I've spoken to over an hour interview or 2 hours, or sometimes they grow real long into 3-hour interviews. And that is really the icing on the cake. I know I've cut back a lot on doing interviews on my podcast of late. I've spent a lot more time because I got a lot more on my mind to share, but this was a real treat. I absolutely enjoyed this conversation with Brian Fleming, and I believe that you will as well. I'll read his bio, and then we'll jump into it. Brian Fleming is an inspired military keynote speaker. He's a combat-wounded Afghanistan war veteran, international speaker, and resilience trainer who helps people be more resilient in tough, turbulent situations. He was severely wounded in action by a suicide bomber who exploded 3 feet away from him in Kandahar, Afghanistan, and he now teaches strategies for overcoming unexpected challenges. Over the past decade as an author and military keynote speaker, Brian has spoken to over 500,000 in live audiences across 42 U.S. states in 7 countries and on 4 continents, and has been featured on every major news network in the United States on his topic. So, let's jump right into it. Brian Fleming, thanks for joining me on Heroes Wanted. Real pleasure to have an opportunity to talk with you. For those that don't know you, why don't you just go ahead and share a little bit about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, my name is Brian Fleming. I'm a military veteran. I served with the U.S. Army's 10th Mountain Division, and while fighting the ground war in Afghanistan, I was a team leader in an infantry platoon. I got blown up a couple times. My vehicle did. One time by a roadside bomb, the other by a suicide bomber who drove his vehicle into my door of my vehicle and exploded and injured me. Spent about 14 months in San Antonio, Texas at a medical center and rehab, burn rehab, reconstructive surgery, and was eventually put out of the military. And this is just the quick version, but was put out of the military medically due to those injuries. And it was one of the most painful things to ever happen to me, and also one of the absolute best things I never could have planned that happened to me.
Wow, that's for sure the quick version, Brian. And I want to dig into a few different parts there because I think that, story is important these days. And the further we get away, and as we were talking before this, and you mentioned social media and how far away social media is from reality, and how fake so much of what we're surrounded by these days truly is, that a story like yours, I think that we can pull so much from. So my first question there for you is how long were you in San Antonio? How long was recovery? Physical therapy on stuff like that is outrageous.
Yeah, I was injured on July 24th of 2006 by the suicide bomber, and I arrived at Brooke Army Medical Center on July 27th, and I stayed there for the next 14 months. And so I'll tell you, and that was, the worst pain about my injury wasn't just the explosion, the blast, waking up in a ditch on the side of Highway 1 in Kandahar. Like, that was bad. But actually, the worst pain I went through was what happened at the medical center when, the nurses, they had to do what's called debridement. And they had to take razor blades and shave and rip and tear all the burned, charred skin off my body, which consisted of, both my hands were 3rd-degree burns. My face and neck was 2nd degree with a little bit of 3rd, which is healed now. And They said it would take about 30 minutes, or they said they'd do it as fast as possible. It took about 30 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity to me. And so, that was a real breaking point in my life. But, they did what they had to do. They kept me alive. They put me back together. I have full functional use of both my hands again. I didn't lose any digits. I didn't lose any limbs. Very grateful for that. And, we all have a story, and I was living quite a turbulent story at that point. And not to get too far ahead, but the single greatest healing element to my life came to me when a guy mentored me, and we can get more into this in a little bit. He taught me how to use my story, and he taught me how to do it through public speaking. And that was not something I had anticipated or planned, but it changed the course of my life and my family tree forever.
That's awesome. Now let's rewind back again to that really quick intro, Brian. And you mentioned getting blown up 2 times. Can you share a little bit about the first time?
Yeah, the first time was on April 18th of 2006. Me and my 16, 17-man scout sniper platoon was up in the Arghandab River Valley. And we had about 5 or 6 gun trucks between all of us. Mine was a lead vehicle. And it was early in the morning. Probably it was right after sunrise had barely just happened. And we had left out from the observation post where we had parked way out in the mountains up on a mountaintop hill. And we went down this little tiny road. It was barely wide enough for a Humvee. And we went up over a hill. We came down, and where the hill flattened out at the bottom, there was a double stack of anti-tank mines buried in the road. Pressure plate detonated. So when our tire ran it over, the pressure plates, collided, wires smashed together, detonated it, blew up the vehicle, set it on fire, completely burned it down. I was able to get out. 2 of my guys were injured. Both returned to duty a month later and were perfectly fine. No lasting injuries, thankfully. And we were stranded out there for about 2 more days until we got reinforcements to come in with another vehicle for us. And then we received a follow-on mission on the way back to the base because, hey, since you're out there anyway, and a lot of people say, wow, you probably got the weekend off. Like, nah, there was no weekend off. It was just, hey, you got another job to do. And we got enough people, we got enough weapons and equipment. Let's go do it.
So how does young Brian Fleming react to that incident? I mean, I know you're kind of prepared, and I know at that point in being in Afghanistan, I'm sure you'd seen or heard about a lot of this stuff happening. How do you react? How do you jump back into things through an experience like that?
Well, initially when the explosion went off, it just seemed like a bunch of dust shot straight through the cabin. It was so loud, I really didn't hear it. If that makes any sense at all, it was just so loud. And after the vehicle landed, my gunner was laying next to me. He had been standing next to me up in the gun turret. And I just kind of looked around, I was looking at the guys, asking the guys, is everyone okay? Is everyone good? My squad leader turned around, he was looking, asking the same thing. Everyone seemed good. So I opened the door, got out. The gunner, he got out. And then as I got out, I realized that one of my guys was still in there in the other back seat, which is, the detonation had gone off right underneath the seat. And he was just sort of hunched over, slumped over, sitting there. So I ran around to his door, opened up his door to help him get out. And he was sitting there. His legs were starting to catch on fire. So I grabbed him, drug him out of the vehicle. Squad leader jumped through that same door and got out because his door was jammed shut by the blast. And, set up perimeter. There was no follow-on ambush, which is nice. A lot of times what happens is they'll blow up a vehicle, then fire machine guns into the smoke and then run, trying to get you once you try and get out of the vehicle. That did not happen, so that was nice. And, after that, it was just, every time your vehicle's in the lead vehicle in the front, you figure you're either really good at your jobs or someone higher up maybe doesn't care for you too much. But we tended to be in the front vehicle a lot, our squad. And some people ask, well, were you afraid to get back in the Humvee? To be honest, I just wasn't. I'm not saying this to sound tough. I just wasn't. I had dealt with the idea of death before I went to Afghanistan. That wasn't something that was of really bother to me. I knew that, anytime things could happen, and it doesn't matter how good the guys on my left and right are. If it's my time, it's going to be my time. And, things are going to happen how they do. And came close a number of times to being my time, but it wasn't. And that was just the first one.
So then let's fast forward a little bit. How much time was in between these two incidents?
The first explosion was April 18th of 2006. The second one was July 24th. So about 3 months.
So it's pretty quick.
Yeah. It was summertime. Nice and warm.
So walk us through this other incident and how, how that happened, and then, and how I'm always, when you're telling the story there's 3 days between when the incident occurs and when you end up in San Antonio, receiving really proper medical attention. I want to get back to that, but let's walk through that second, the second incident where you're injured. And then I don't want to skip past those 3 days because
sure. Yeah.
My sister was injured in Iraq, and we didn't find out from the Army until probably like 3 or 4 days later, but we knew about it immediately afterwards because my brother just happened to be on a patrol that was going through, he was stationed at some fuel depot that she was supposed to be passing through, and they hadn't seen each other for years and years, and were really excited about having this reunion, and she didn't show up. So he made a phone call home to let us know something was going on. But I know that interim time there in between seems to disappear in the ether on these stories. But those 3 days of in between of for family and for these injuries and recovery from these injuries is huge.
Yeah. So what happened? I don't know why I wanted to do this, especially after the first explosion, but I was actually, the second time my vehicle got blown up, I actually wasn't with my platoon. I was in my first sergeant's Humvee. And the reason I was on this convoy was because I was trying to reclass my job from infantry to EOD, which is explosive ordnance disposal. They're the bomb squad, right? So if it blows up, it's their business. If you see that guy or that lady running, you better be in front of them. Well, why I wanted to do that job at this point, I have no idea. But I did. And so there was what they call a P3 on my medical profile, which basically said I was physically unfit for active duty, which is weird because I was in the best shape of my life. We've been running up and down mountains, fighting and shooting at Taliban, getting blown up for 5 months. I was in Superman shape. And I couldn't reclass. I had to get reevaluated by a doctor. Well, they couldn't do that at Fob Lagman, where I was based. So I had to go all the way to Kandahar Airfield. So I, worked that out to get that and ended up in First Sergeant's Humvee, lead vehicle. I was a truck commander and lead vehicle of a 15-vehicle convoy going down there. And we got about 2 miles from the front gate to CAF. And a white minivan pulled out in front of my vehicle. And didn't think anything of it. My driver went to pass him on the left because he was going really slow. So he's right here. And as we're coming up and right next to him, he's literally right outside my passenger door. And we're passing him in the left lane. He's on our right, just like you would pass someone going down the highway who's going too slow. As we got right up next to him, just wham, just everything just went up. I have no recollection of what happened. He hit the clicker as a suicide bomber, blew himself and his van into about 10 million pieces right there in the street. It's about lunchtime on July 24th. I woke up laying in a ditch on the side of the road, burned and bloody, right there on the side of Highway 1 in Kandahar. Had no idea where I was or what happened. My helmet had been blown off my head. I had a fountain of blood and just everything pouring out of my face. My face was a full face, 2nd-degree burn. The entire top layer, at least, had been completely burned off. It was about 130, 120, 130 degrees outside at that point. Very, very hot to begin with. And then having your skin burned off and having that kind of temperature at elevation beat down on you, with no clouds blocking the sun, that was even more painful. And me and my gunner were both injured. And it's weird how certain things happen, because sometimes bad things happen in life, and then something else just sort of sprinkles on top of it. You think to yourself, really? Like, really? And what happened was, my driver was a medic. That came in handy. So he stabilized me, got me good, stabilized my gunner, called in the medevac. And the medevac helicopter comes down. Well, you know what happens when a Black Hawk helicopter is about 50 feet off the ground coming down? Anything not anchored to the ground is going up and everywhere at 100 miles an hour or more. Well, we're in a desert, so there's lots of sand and rock and dirt. And that thing comes down, and the rotor wash just creates this cloud and just spits dirt and rocks everywhere, and just peppers me in my burned off face and my hands. And it was just one of those days, when nothing goes right. You woke up and had a bad year that day. And it was very painful. It felt like a bunch of knives stabbing into my burned face. And again, the second degree burns on my face healed, so you can't tell I was burned anymore. But if you go to blownupguy.com, that's my website, you can see pictures of what I looked like right after they got me in, before they touched me. Someone took my picture and gave it to me. And there's thousands of guys like me who've been blown up. I'm just the guy who thought it'd be funny to have a website, blownupguy.com. It was easy to remember. And I actually looked blown up when I bought that for $9 back in, 2007 or something. And so that's what happened. They got me to Kandahar Airfield, which was literally like 2 miles away from us. Fastest medevac, ever. So got me there, then flew me to Bagram in northern Afghanistan, to Landstuhl in Germany, and then to San Antonio, Texas. And it was interesting. Just everyone kept taking my picture. One guy did it for fun and gave it to me. I'm glad he did. The person in Germany did it because I didn't have a military ID card. It was in my shoulder pocket, and my whole top had gotten cut off me on the battlefield. So she's like, "Hey, I need to take your picture." And I was bloody. I was nasty. And she said, "You can't go back to America without a government issued photo ID. So we got to make one." And so I've got the ID still, and it's got my bloody blasted face on it. It's actual military ID card. So that's my little souvenir. I had fun with the gate guards at BAMC at Fort Sam Houston, because eventually my face healed, but my card stayed the same. And they would always look at it and go, "Dear God, is that you? What the hell happened to you?" As I'm going through the gates, and I got to show my ID. This girl who was an E2, she tried to collect that card from me when I was getting out, ETSing or getting out of the military. And I said, "Here's the thing." I said, "I won't tell anyone I didn't give it to you, but you're not getting this ID card back." I said, "It's my souvenir, and there's no way I'm giving it to you." And I was an E5, so I was kind of charming her a little, but also like, it'll be our secret. Like, I'm not, I won't tell anyone you didn't really take it and destroy it. It won't come back on you. But I got there, and on the night of July 27th, just 3 days later, and they did the whole debridement process. And my wife, she kissed my burned, bloody face. She'd shown up there before me, and I told her, "You showed up. You don't need to kiss me. This is nasty. You're here. I get it. You're faithful. You showed up. You don't have to kiss me." But she did anyway, and it was disgusting. But hey, we're still married 16 years later.
So I know time makes everything look a little different, and the way you tell the story now, and the way you can laugh at it, and the way you can look back, shows that there's a lot of healing that happened in this process as well.
Oh yeah.
Because it's difficult to have something tragic happen to you. It's one thing to have your body heal up. It's another thing to be able to come to a point where you can laugh about it, and you can see the humor in it, and you can find the humor in life.
And here's the thing too. What I realized is that everybody has coping mechanisms for dealing with pain. I learned mine is sarcasm and humor. And so it's almost like it doesn't matter how bad things are. Like if I can crack a joke, like I'll do it. Like, I mean, I had one of our guys, man. Oh my gosh. Like in our first gunfight ever. You know what a CIB is, a combat infantryman badge? It's this right here. It's this blue and silver right here. Well, you have to get into a gunfight to get one of those. Literally, that's how you get it. And so, like, here's an example. This guy, like the other like company of infantry guys had already gotten into it some, so they got theirs. So now, like, our platoon hadn't made contact yet. And so we were like praying for, a gunfight because we can't go back and, hey, those guys got some and we didn't. If there's anybody listening who is not in the military, I know this doesn't make sense. It's crazy sounding, but I promise it's how soldiers are. And so, we got in a gunfight. We're taking fire and we're behind this huge boulder, returning fire up this mountainside. I'm launching grenades. And this guy looks at me from my platoon and he goes, "Hey, Sergeant," he said, "you think we get our CIBs now?" And we're like returning fire. I'm reloading. I thought he was going to cover me. And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Do you think we get our CIBs now?" I'm like, "Dude, yeah." I'm like, "I think we're good. Like, can we get out of here first?" He's sort of laughing. He's like, "Roger, Sergeant." He's this real thick Cajun accent. He's from central Louisiana. I just tell that story because it's like people could be, the funniest things happen in the worst times. And, yeah, things can get bad, but it doesn't mean you can't laugh at stuff. Now, some things aren't a laughing matter in the moment. I understand that. But I laugh at my moments. And, yeah, and it's healing. And I also had a mentor come into my life who'd been horribly blasted and blown up and burned in Vietnam. And he taught me how to use my story. He's one of the funniest people I ever met in my life. That guy can't talk about pain without making you laugh hysterically. And so when I saw him with half his body burned off third degree, including half his face, and he's telling me about how, he was laughing what was left of his face off when he started, coming around after his injury, I'm like, oh my God, this guy is great. Like, so some of that rubbed off on me too. And there's probably a little bit of lunacy involved as well somewhere.
Yeah. Well, you got that noggin shook pretty good a couple of times, Brian.
Yeah, that's right. I got a medical file the size of an Encyclopedia Britannica, if you're old enough to remember what that is. That's right. Yeah, so we all have coping mechanisms, and laughter and humor is mine. Everyone has to. That's the thing, though. Everyone has to find what works for them. Not everybody has a laughing matter. In time, if you can laugh, great. If you can't, find a way to deal with things. Find what works for you.
So on the hard days, Brian, on the hard days of that 14 months there in San Antonio, what gave you hope?
Honestly, I mean, I guess I didn't think about it much. And here's what I mean. Like, I remember a therapist asked me, "Oh, they got blown up. How'd that make you feel?" Of course, I'm like, how the hell do you think it felt? Like freaking hurt, like they gave you a PhD, that was my response to him. Like, but I just kind of figured, well, I didn't die. I'm here. So, my body's going to heal and I'll get out of the Army probably and I'll figure something out. I was never truly hopeless. I've always sort of understood my life as a story, and it had just gotten really interesting. And, how things unfold in life. I mean, no story is interesting without problems, without catastrophe, without things going wrong. I mean, you want to watch a boring movie nobody will ever go see? Create a movie where there's no problem for the character, for the hero in the story. Like you'll fall asleep, you'll be bored, you'll demand your money back. I've always believed there's a reason for things, and if I don't know the reason, I'm okay with that. I've never been under any impression that life should be peaceful or that it should be smooth. Ideally, it's nice when it is. It's just nothing great ever usually happens when it's that way. And I definitely don't do my best work when life is too comfortable.
Do you think that's the difference between having letting that victim mentality seep in and creep into your life?
Yeah, I mean, a victim mentality. If someone who plays a victim gives up all their power, because a victim is like someone who's kidnapped and they're handcuffed in the back of a moving van, and nobody knows they're in that moving van out in the middle of the desert. Like, they're totally helpless. But like in the story of our lives, you and I, we're the protagonists. We're the main character. And that person always has an option. They can sit down and whine, and sometimes, do that if you need for a time. Yep. But then, like, you have the choice to sit down and complain about how things are. I get it. Sometimes life sucks, but you also have the choice to move, to do something, to go in some direction, create some sort of motion. If you're doing anything, creating motion, you're not a victim. You're the main character, the hero in the story. And when you create motion, when you start doing things, you meet people, things happen. Things happen that you never planned or you didn't have any power over that actually can make your story a better one. And that was the case with me.
I like it. So why don't you tell us about this mentor that you've mentioned a couple of times already, and tell us how you met him and what kind of an impact having somebody like that come into your life, I guess, kind of, change your story.
Yeah, the impact was eternal. It was life-changing. It wasn't just life-changing. It was family tree changing. My family and my kids have better opportunities in life now because I met that man. He came to Brooke Army Medical Center, and he talked to me and 20 or 30 other guys who had all been blown up, shot up, messed up, just like he had been in Vietnam. He came through telling his story, sharing the lessons, making us laugh. And basically, he and I hit it off, and he said, hey, I'll show you how to do something with all this if you're willing. And of course I was willing. And he ended up hiring me to work at his company after I got out. And I would work for his company during the week. He would train me on the weekends in public speaking. He'd take me on the road with him and put me on all his stages. And he never charged me a nickel, which you can't find that kind of mentorship. Genuine guy, great guy, changed my life. And what started happening was I started seeing people impacted by my story. I wasn't talking about it for the sake of talking about it, but here's the thing. He knew that me telling my story was healing. And sometimes it was in front of 300 people. The first time it was in front of 3,000. And that was like a fastball to the face from 5 feet away, like think fast. But, he never said it, but he knew, because that was his story. He knew that there's healing in sharing your story, because other people find healing when they hear about someone else who made it through their thing. And, the first time he gave me 2 minutes and basically said, hey, take 2 minutes, tell them about yourself. I was still wrapped up in burn bandages. And I got up and I said, hey, I'm Brian. I guess I'm still here for a reason. I got blown up. Go for it. I don't know what I said. Some crappy motivational something probably. It definitely wasn't any good. But when I got off stage, everything changed. And here's what happened. When I got off stage, this young lady, before the event was even over, this young lady came up to the side of the stairs right there on the side of the stage. And she, don't even think she told me her name, but she said, hey, growing up, I was raped, I was molested, I was abused. All this horrible stuff. It's ridiculous. And she was probably 23 at the time. And she said, her boyfriend was abusive and he had just broke up with her a couple of weeks ago. And she tried to kill herself a couple of weeks ago, but it failed. And I'm just standing there. I have no idea what to tell this lady. She just put that on me. And then she said, but if you can survive all that, talking about Afghanistan, she said, I think I can get through this. And that was the turning point. It was a 1 degree shift. It was small, but it was huge, because for some reason now something came out of me. Something said, like, I told Dave that night too, like, teach me how to do this speaking thing. I said, because I'm going to do this or die trying, with or without you. Like, it was the only time in my life I think I was ever so sure of something. I didn't care how broke I was going to go if I had to, or if I had to die trying to do it. Something came out of me where I have to do whatever just happened. And he said, don't worry, I'll show you. And he did. And I didn't know for a long time what exactly people would ask me all the time. What's the one big lesson that got you through all that? What was the big thing? The one thing? There wasn't one thing, but I did learn about 4 or 5 years later what happened inside of me that I was completely unaware of at the moment that contributed to in massive amount to my healing. And it was this. I found this book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He was, I can tell by the look on your face, I think you've read it. He was a Nazi prison camp survivor. He was a psychiatrist, and lost pretty much his whole family in the concentration camps. And in this book, which you can read it in an afternoon, I mean, every person in the world should read this book. And when it comes to the topic of suffering, this is what he said. He said, in some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning. So I didn't know what happened to me after I talked to that girl until about 4 or 5 years later. I read this book, and that one sentence, he summed up what I didn't know how to say in thousands of words. He summed it up in a sentence. What I had done is I had accidentally stumbled across a shred of a sense of meaning in my suffering, because it helped her suffer a little bit less. She wasn't going to go home and drink a bottle of pills or put a pistol in her mouth that night, like she had tried previously, or however she did. I don't know how she tried before, but I knew that she wasn't going to. And I thought, even if it was just for her or a few other people I meet, maybe this has something to do with the reason I was injured, to be the right person at the right time, in the right place, right now, right here. And I've had, oh my God, over the past 13, 14 years I've been doing this, I've had that experience so many times, I can't even hardly remember them all. And the thing is this, I'm never the one controlling that miracle. I want that to be really clear. I'm never the one controlling that. I don't have an earpiece in where someone's telling me, hey, the lady in front of you has cancer. Like, maybe you should tell her, hey, I know you have cancer, and she'll think it's a miracle. And she, no, like, people come out of the woodwork. Like, the best things that have happened in my life, like, I'm not even responsible. Dave, he didn't know me. I didn't mean to sort of meet him. This young lady, I didn't mean to meet her. I didn't even have any advice for her. I didn't know what to say. But just the fact that she heard about what I had went through and survived gave her hope that she can keep going too. And, that was enough for me. That was enough to keep going on. And when I felt that, when I met her that night, I now had a new mission in life, which is a hard thing that a lot of people getting out of the military deal with. We always have a mission in the military. Then you get out and there's no more mission. And no one taught you how to plan your own missions. And so now you have this directionlessness in life that a lot of veterans deal with. And I did not, because I had a mentor in my life. I had a very strong sense of meaning because of meeting her. And then I now had a new mission. I wanted to find other people who are also suffering and just share a little bit of my story and a little bit of a couple lessons that might be helpful for people. Like that was like the reason, to me at least, why I survived. And now I've been doing it, almost a decade and a half. And it's still the reason I'm here. It's still the reason I do this. Like, I never meant to do this. I always tell people, if you think I suck at speaking, I don't even care. Like, I never meant to do this. And so, I keep speaking, so it's kind of working out. But like these people that came into my life, I did not control those miracles. I'm not the one. I didn't orchestrate these things. There's no possible way anybody could have orchestrated some of these things that have happened. But I've never shared my story for the sake of talking about myself. It's always been for the sake of laying the foundation so I can say what I really want to say that can help somebody win a battle they're facing in their lives. And that's been healing for me, because I see other people get helped, and that, they're healed because they hear my story and get hope. Well, I get healed in return because I see them receive hope, and they just took another step in the right direction, even if it's a small one. So everybody wins.
Yeah. I see one misconception in what you were saying there. And that's the idea that so many guys come out of the military, and in the military, they always had a mission, and then they get out and they don't have a mission. Because the guys that didn't serve in the military, the majority of them, don't have a mission either. And there's the only difference is that those guys in the military were able to experience what it means to have a mission. Mm. And I think that once you truly experience what it means to have a mission, the need and desire to continue having some kind of mission or purpose to push you through, because no matter then how hard things get, no matter what the struggle is, no matter what, you always know what direction you're moving in. And whether you're walking or crawling or running at a full sprint in that direction at some times in your life, you at least know where you're going. And I think that idea of not having a mission is much broader than just, just guys who have actually had that through their military experience, because from what I see around me, most men right now are completely directionless, completely lacking a mission. And like you're saying, your mission is really your purpose. And I believe, and I can't really, as much as I've thought about it and meditated on it and played around with the thoughts in my mind, I cannot find a true purpose that anybody will ever have in their life that is not serving other people.
Yeah, I agree completely. And if it's not meant for the better good of other people in some way, I've never found that, because you can't find it by just trying to focus on and get yours. Like you might get the thing you want, but it's not going to bring you what you and I are talking about. And I think with the military guys and ladies, the difference, I think, between us and maybe someone outside the military who's never been in and feels directionless is that what we're dealing with is the knowledgeable lack of what we know is out there. Like, we know what it's like to have a mission that matters, and now we don't have it. There's a hole. And I think if you've never been in the military, or, possibly, and you've never had any real sense of mission in life, maybe you don't know how wide that gap is. Like, you're kind of lucky if you don't know, because it's painful. But you're also not lucky, because if you don't know, then you can't fix it. But and here's the thing too. It's interesting. I'm actually reading Don Miller's book right now, Hero on a Mission. If you haven't read that, I'm only about 30 pages in. It's excellent. Donald Miller, Hero on a Mission. It just came out this week. He's been one of my business mentors and marketing mentors. And he talks all about this. And I mean, if you don't have some sort of mission that you're living for that's greater than you, it has to surpass you. If you're not, you're just kind of droning, getting by. I've tried other business ventures. I've made money other ways, other than speaking and other than writing books like I do. And I've found that I lose my fire fast because it's actually disconnected from my mission. And sometimes I just get bored and I'm like, hey, I'd like to grow a business that isn't based on my story or connected, just like normal people, not that I'm not normal. I am more normal, but it's like, but then it's like, I always end up floating right back to where, and it's like, here's the next way to use this, to develop it. And you're dead on though. It's got to be about other people. And, it's weird. For the first 4 or 5 years of speaking, I had some people tell me, hey, you should go share your story. And they would pay me 3 months worth of Army pay for 60-minute speech. So I'm like, hey, I can keep doing this. No one's even trying to shoot me. I mean, it's great. Then other people are like, every now and then you have the other ones that are like, oh, you're just out there talking about yourself. I'm like, yeah, but they're paying me a lot of money and they keep doing it. So I'm like, why would I not? Then that's where I realized it was about, not about just telling my story. I had things inside out. It was still working, but it was inside out. 90% of my speech was my story in the beginning. Then I realized my story is not about me. My story is about 10% of the overall message that I need to be sharing. And I had to create a message around my story that included my story, but it wasn't, the whole entirety of it wasn't Brian's story. That's why, like, I had this keynote speech I've been doing for over a decade called How to Stand Firm When Everything Around You is Blowing Up. That's my keynote speech. It's on resilience. It's how the world's most resilient people overcome extreme trauma and tragedy. And it's how I did it. It's how friends of mine did it. How people throughout history, like Viktor Frankl, did it. Common themes that all just incredibly resilient people have in common. And I just happened to find myself in that group where I was moving forward after this. And so I thought, well, I'll talk about that. And I'll use my story as a little bit of connection and credibility points. And, that's when things really turned up, because they really, in speaking and everything changed once I made that transformation. But it goes back to what you said. It wasn't even about me telling my story. It was about, I was telling it for the purpose of other people. And so that's what everything changes when your mission is something that comes out of you, and it's for the benefit of other people.
So as we were kind of talking about earlier, before we even started recording here, Brian, and we were talking about the power of story. And if there are some people out there that are listening to this podcast that maybe need some healing in their life, or maybe could see the power of story, because I don't know if we mentioned it on the podcast, but I know we talked about beforehand, and just the natural humanness of telling stories. For millennia, that's how we communicated everything. There was no TV, social media, none of this extra, even radio stories that people would get caught up in, right? No newspapers to read. For millennia, it was sitting around campfires or crushing hard corn into flour and sitting around and just sharing stories. And out of those stories, there was healing, because people, like you were saying about yourself, you're telling your story, so you're healing. But at the same time, there are so many lessons that come out of your story, where I'm sure it's such a perfect example, the story you share of the first time you were up there and somebody of the opposite sex going through absolutely nothing that you experienced, but yet she could pull something out of that story. Oh, yeah. That gave her hope for tomorrow. If there's people out there and they're kind of questioning this, or what it would take, or if their story is important, would you have any thoughts for them?
Well, you made an interesting point. That young lady had dealt with a lot of the same post-traumatic stress issues that I dealt with, but she was abused as a child and as a teenager and a young lady. I was never abused, but I went to war. So we were hurt in two very different ways, but you notice we ended up dealing with some of the same exact issues after the fact. See, there's like a million different ways we can get hurt as human beings, but there's only a finite handful of issues that we deal with as human beings as a result of trauma. And you get a lot of people saying things like, hey, you haven't been in my shoes, you don't know what it was like, therefore you can't help me. I'm going to tell you right now, that's the stupidest, pardon my French, the stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard anyone say. And here's why I say that. I used to say it until I realized how stupid I sounded. And here's why I say that. Because I know a lot of military veterans are probably listening to this, and they're going, oh, yeah, well, they don't know what it's like being, up in Afghanistan or Iraq. And okay, well, here's what I realized. When I was on the ground in Afghanistan, living in the mountains, setting up ambushes against Taliban, living out there, we're hunting them, they're hunting us. We had these people called pilots, Air Force and Navy pilots, and they were flying these jets called A-10 Warthogs. They were called close air support, meaning when guys on the ground like us needed additional firepower and help, they were circling in the sky waiting for our call. All right. Now, here's the deal. If we would have gotten attacked and overrun, let's say there's 17 of us. Let's say there's 150 Taliban heading our way. And the leader of the platoon said, hey, guys, I'm going to call in air support, but maybe I won't, because we don't want command to think we can't handle ourselves on the battlefield without asking for help, because that's weak, asking for help, That would be stupid. And that guy would either get killed by his own guys, or everybody would die, or just about everybody would die. You would never turn down air support if you need it. And not only that, here's one of the big advantages of air support. Not just the 30 millimeter Vulcan cannon with exploding rounds, or the 500-pound bombs, the machine gun that fires 4,000 rounds a minute. All right. That's awesome enough. But here's the thing. That pilot up in that A-10, he's flying around, or the helicopter pilots, they can see our battlefield from an angle that we cannot see. And they can see things on our battlefield that we cannot see. We can't see over that ridge to our 11 o'clock. But you know what? They can see that and way beyond it and go, hey, don't go over there. There's 150 of them. Sit tight until we get reinforcements, and we're going to make a plan. Now, we could sit there and say, oh, that pilot, he's up there. He's got his Gatorade, and he's got his air-conditioned cockpit. He doesn't know what it's like being one of us. Why would we listen to what he has to say? It's because he's not in our shoes, that he has a different vantage point, a different perspective on our situation and on our battlefield, which can save our lives and our friends' lives and help us win more and die and lose less. Here's the thing. Every day, you talk to enough people, you'll hear people say, I don't want to talk to them. They don't know what I've been through. They don't need to. Sometimes the fact that somebody is so different than you and they've never been through what you've been through, that's the reason they can actually help you more than even some people who have been in the same stuff you've been in. Because the people who have been in the same fights you've been in, sometimes they're blinded by the same effects of that kind of situation. But somebody who's never been in it is oftentimes very unhindered in the same way as you, and they can actually show you a way out of your battlefield. And so, all that to say, just nobody's so different that they can't contribute something. Everybody has a story. You don't have to exaggerate it. You don't have to act like it's more than it is. Heck, if you just know the structure of how a good story is told, you could take the most boring story and make it compelling and interesting, while the person with a really intriguing story that has no story structure is just all over the place and losing people's attention left and right.
I like it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast and the books that you've written?
Yeah. My wife, Jamie, and I, we have a podcast called Marriage Battle Plan, because if you've been married more than a day, it can be a battlefield. And that's about the most I'll ever say like that, because my wife and I have this idea. We're probably not the first ones to come up with it, but this is our experience. Good relationships aren't difficult. Bad ones are. Good relationships are not difficult. Bad relationships are difficult. And that doesn't mean you won't have times when you disagree or you don't argue. It doesn't mean you're not normal. But there's so much bad marriage advice on the internet. It blows my mind. Some of these Facebook marriage groups and some of the crap that people post in there. And then the advice people give is even worse than the crap that was posted. And it's great marriage takes years of hard work. No, it doesn't. If you're married to a person you hate, maybe. But for my wife and I, we know other people too. We're we have our disagreements and fights sometimes. Doesn't mean it's bad. We have a great relationship. Our marriage has never been difficult. Our marriage has never taken hard work and effort. It hasn't. We got married 3 months before I went to Afghanistan. We've been married 99.9% of our marriage has been post-war injury and deployment, and all that brings with it. We just celebrated 16 years last month. And it's not that things are, good for you, they're always perfect. No, that's not it. But this whole idea, people buy into narratives, and a narrative is a story. People buy into, even churches preach this, and I hate it. I grew up in that. It's it's all the cliches, hey, how'd the old guy make it all those years in marriage? Well, he learned 2 words. Yes, ma'am. I got to ask my wife for permission. I don't ask my wife for permission for anything, and she doesn't ask me. We're not slaves to each other. We're partners. There's just all this. You have to be very careful. The advice that you take, even if it sounds good, because it'll plant a seed. It'll set a foundation. And her and I, we just know. We look at our relationship together. We look at our friendships with other people, and we test it. We go, are good relationships hard or bad ones hard? Good relationships we found are usually very easy. Bad relationships are the hard ones. They're the hardest ones you always have to maintain. It's always the most drama, always the most work, always the most trouble. And we're at a point in life, we just don't do that anymore. Like, we just cut people out, man. Like, I got a machete, and I just like wave it through the air in my house alone. I'm like, they're done. They're out of the story. I'm cutting that branch. I'm cutting that root up. Like, it's like, we're done with that. Like, we're not doing it. I'm 37, 38 years old almost now. Like, I don't have time for this stuff anymore. And so, yeah, marriage battle plan. We talk about certain aspects of the battlefield that I learned in combat and that she learned being married to me as a soldier. We talk about how those things apply to marriage and how you can win. And, for example, instead of shooting at each other all the time, you learn how to identify the real enemy that's getting in between you and turning you against each other. And then you get shoulder to shoulder and you concentrate your firepower and you take that thing out. We talk about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's good. Another thing, too, that, again, it kind of goes along that same lines is the avoidance of any sort of friction whatsoever in order to maintain some sort of semblance of peace. But without friction, there's never any growth, So
yeah, what a boring story. We never had a fight.
Right.
Like, wow, your sex life must be really, wow. Never had a fight, no emotion. Like, well, I wouldn't want to know about that. It must be boring.
There can't be any depth there either, Brian.
Yeah.
There can't be any depth there. It's until you have that friction on your hands, that creates the calluses if it's done regularly. And if you're not fighting, if you're not sharing or not, I guess it's less about fighting and more about standing your ground on the things you think you should stand your ground on, and more about bringing up the things that shouldn't be avoided, that need to be talked about. And the longer you put them off, the more difficult they become. But no, I agree.
Do you want to know one of the simplest secrets in a discussion, whether it's with your spouse or someone else? If you'll just maintain this kind of tone of voice as you're talking, you absolutely refuse to raise your voice or get sarcastic. You just be very respectful. And when they want to up the ante, you don't have to go with them. You can stay like this. You can speak respectfully. You can speak at an even tone. Now, this doesn't always work for me because I'm not naturally that kind of guy, but you can control the tone and the volume of a situation. By the way, the louder you both get, the less you're actually going to get out of it. The less productive things are going to happen, the more two people are like trying to outdo each other vocally. But you can talk about just about anything if you'll just be open with humility and like, I'm not trying to get anything here. I'm not trying to start anything. And you just talk very calmly. If they want to get up and up, they'll start to, maybe sometimes. But if you don't go there with them and try and one up them, you actually keep the conversation tethered to an extent where you can have a real productive conversation that doesn't just completely blow up and destroy parts of your marriage. And that's in any relationship, whether it's a marriage or a friend, Yeah, so that's the Marriage Battle Plan podcast. If you look it up, marriagebattleplan.com/podcast or anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Awesome. And then why don't you share about your books?
Yeah. The biggest one I've done is this one right here called Redeployed. And it's how combat veterans can fight the battle within and win the war at home. If you go on Amazon, just type in Redeployed. It's got me and my co-author on the front. It's got the orange background. There's another one called Redeployment. That is not ours. That came out actually the same year, just after ours did. But yeah, my
like a romance novel with a dude with his shirt off. The Redeployment.
No, actually, I think it was like a guy's first-hand account in Iraq. I've never read it, but yeah, it's the one with the orange background, two guys on the front. My co-author Chad, he he did 9 tours in Afghanistan with SOCOM and had a really bad bout with post-traumatic stress after coming home. Almost lost his marriage. Miraculously, they held it together. Now they've been married over 20 years. He's the founder of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. If you've heard of that, I was with him in the very beginning when he started that. We had met just as he was starting that. And best program I've ever seen or been a part of for veterans, period, as far as how effective it is. But yeah, if you go on Amazon, Redeployed is right there, and you can get a copy of that too if you want.
Yeah, he's the man. He was heavily involved in Save Our Allies, right?
Yeah, that was his, I think. Yeah. Or him and some others, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, he's man.
He's doing a lot, yeah.
Yeah, to see him pivot the way that he did as quickly as he did with Mighty Oaks and stuff like that, and kind of get rolling with Save Our Allies was nothing short of impressive, you know?
Yeah, he's a guy who gets stuff done. Like when he sets his mind to something, he wants to do something, like he gets it freaking done. And I mean, when he started Mighty Oaks, like they had like nothing. Like they started literally just with nothing.
That's awesome.
Wife, 3 kids. Somehow we're going to make it. Just sold his MMA gyms in Houston, to move out to Colorado where he was at the time and wanting to start that. And, just had a dream, a vision, and, just had no advantages and, kept at it. And man, great things happened.
Yeah, good. That's right there. Like goes right back to what we were talking about having that mission. And having that purpose that mission gives you, because then it doesn't matter how difficult and how much crap you got to go through. If you know where you want to end up, you just keep fighting forward for it.
Yeah, that mission is the real anchor that I always kind of say when you get tired of pushing everything and trying to make it happen, it will pull you through the rest of the drudgery and hell that you're trying to get through. Like something happens where dynamically it shifts, and you still like to try, but instead of just being all push on your end, your purpose will pull you through things that are just unimaginable.
Yeah, but those trials and difficulties will happen, and they will come everywhere in your life. But I think the older or the more mature I get, the more I understand that those things that so many others see as difficulties are actually the beauty of life and are actually opportunities for you to either grow or learn, but also are times of testing to see how committed you truly are to that mission. And you can only get to where you need to go if you go through those. And that's just part of the cost.
Well, yeah. The next place you're trying to get, like you think you're trying to get around that thing to get where you're trying to go. Your next thing is on the other side of that sometimes. And there's no other way to get there.
Yeah.
Like you've got to jump and sometimes like you land face first on the concrete and you go, ow, that hurt. Like, oh, this must not be the way. Why? Because it didn't work out or it hurt the first time? Like, give up and try it again. It's like the best things. I mean, I wasn't even supposed to meet Dave Reaver. I wasn't even supposed to be at the hospital the day I was there that I met him, that he came through speaking. I didn't have any appointments. And going to the hospital every day gave me tension headaches because it was such a stressful experience of being there where nobody would have blamed me for staying home. But I went. I did the thing that was inconvenient, that caused me physical pain. But because I did that, I met one guy one time. And now you and I are having this conversation. I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't do what I do. We wouldn't be talking right now if I had never gone to that hospital that day. I didn't have the appointment. The one day I didn't. And nobody would have blamed me. They would have said, well, he's there every day. But I never would have known what I missed out on. I did something that was painful and inconvenient, and I didn't want to go. But I knew he was going to be there. And so I did it anyway. And it was the little tiny thing that shifted in my life. And it completely shifted the course of my life. And I don't know who I'd be today if I would have made that easy decision to just sit home that day. And I never would have known what I'd missed out on, the life I now live. I would have never known that I'd missed out on anything. That would be, to me, that's the saddest part. I often wonder how much I miss out on or other people miss out on. Because things are disguised as work or effort or pain, and it's like you don't know what's on the other side of that. Like, maybe it's nothing, but it could be, you might meet your Dave Reaver on the other side of that hell. Like, get in it, man. Get in that fight.
Yeah. I think that's the problem with a comfort zone, right? That's the problem with getting sucked into that comfort zone. We as humans desire comfort so much, and we live in this world right now where all we have all around us all day long, 24/7, really can be comfort if that's what we desire. So it's so easy. And then, I think too, there's a lot of confusion about what a comfort zone is too, because for some people, the comfort zone is going to the gym. And people don't look at it that way. They look at it as, oh, no, this is a good thing that I do. And then there's other people, their comfort zone is sitting in their spot in their pew every single Sunday and also being there on Wednesday nights also for church service. But yet there's something destructive about that comfort zone too when it becomes too much of a comfort zone. And then we have comfort zones too. I've been talking a lot about on my podcast about the expectations of others. And we allow other people to put us in these little boxes of who we are around them and what they accept us to do, who they expect us to be. And we fall into those. And it can be different with your boss. It can be different with your neighbor. It can be different with, your wife and kids. It can be different for everybody, but you get stuck in these little, at one point sometimes people like to say they don't want to be stuck in a box, but the reality is you can be comfortable in that box that other people put you in as well. And until you sack up and step outside of that box and step outside of those expectations, and too many people fear stepping outside of that box because they think if they step outside, part of it's because when you step outside of the box of those other people's expectations, you're experiencing freedom. And freedom is actually freaking scary. Because those people will scream at you and criticize you and call you a heretic and every nasty thing you could think because you got out of the thing that they're still in. Exactly. But that's one of the benefits. But it's scary to experience freedom, but you get freedom. But number two is the other benefit is you get to see who's on your side and who's with you really quickly when you step outside of who people think you should be. So all of a sudden you step outside of that and people are like, wow, I don't like this guy anymore. Or wow, this guy, I can get behind this. I like this different version. Yeah. And I think though that we get scared of that freedom because we're not sure how wild or crazy we might become, Well, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. Yeah. What if it doesn't work and we look bad? Or what if we lose everything? Yep. Or we fall right back into fear, Yeah. And then it's like, on the topic of, people turning on you, be ready. Think of the people who would absolutely never turn on you, like the friends. These guys are solid. It's going to be one or more of them. It's going to be the friggin' Judas. It's not going to be the Roman soldier looking for Jesus. It's going to be Judas, one of the 12, one of the closest guys that's going to put the knife in your back. It's going to be it happened to me this past year, just out of nowhere. And I hadn't even talked to the guy in a while. I didn't know he hated me for the past year and a half. And then it turns out like, oh, wow, like, oh, whatever, man. Like, oh, he did block my phone. He did block me on Facebook. He's not there. Like, where'd that come from? No idea. No clue, man. But I don't have time for that. So, yeah. Be ready for hell to raise itself in every direction from everything that matters to you sometimes. But it's worth stepping out. And what you'll realize is when you lose those people, you'll find that other people, even if they're new people, will come alongside you and say, hey, I believe in what you're doing. Like, what can I do to help? So you might lose one or two, but you'll gain 4 or 5 for each one. And people love seeing somebody step out and do something bold. It reminds them, I think, of what they want to do, but maybe they don't have the guts to do it yet in their own life. And it's like that old phrase. I don't remember who said it, but when a strong man takes a stand, the spines of others are stiffened. I don't know if it was C.S. Lewis or Billy Graham, one of those, but that's the truth. People love to watch other people rise up and do things because it gives them courage that maybe they can too. Yeah, I just did a series on Gideon. And you went from the Israelites, hiding from the Midianites, right? In caves and clefts and just trying to do whatever they could to survive, right? And then all of a sudden Gideon, and it's not all of a sudden, and you kind of, I'm sure, miss days and weeks in between what's going on, right? But all of a sudden Gideon tears down this idol to Baal. And all of a sudden now there's 30,000 or I think 32,000 men standing around him ready to go to battle. Now 22,000 of them were scared and ended up leaving, and it got dwindled down to the 300. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, just like you're saying, 32,000 men saying, okay, I can see the value in this.
Yeah. Well, and even though a minority ended up staying with him, sometimes that's all you need. A lot of people don't realize this, but during the American Revolution, the majority of the colonists were not for fighting the British. It was I don't remember the percentage, but it was a small percentage of Washington, his army, and people saying, we're not doing this anymore. We're putting it all on the line. We're driving out the most powerful military of our time in the world. We're going to beat them, or we're going to die trying. Like, it wasn't even a majority. It was a minority percentage of the American colonists who actually wanted to go, who were up for fighting the British, because nobody wanted to, have themselves and their families hung from the highest tree in town. They were scared, and they should have been. But it was a small number of men in percentage wise, and made all the difference.
Yep.
Yeah. And, we don't have to have everyone on our side, but if we have a few good ones, boy, you get a couple of the right ones. Oh man, there's so many things you can accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah. You can change the world.
Yeah. Start with changing yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. That's where it's got to start, man.
It's got to start here. Yeah. I get so sick and tired of hearing all this change, and everything's got a cause attached to it nowadays. And everyone wants to stand for a cause, but some people are just still garbage. Like, man, you still lie to you still cheat on your spouse, man. Like, why should I trust you in this venture? Like, you cheat on her. Why wouldn't you cheat on me as a business partner? Like, fix yourself, man. Like, don't go change the world. Change yourself first, and let the world be changed by that.
Yeah. I think that's one of Jordan Peterson's things too, is about changing yourself. Sure. And he goes into, I think he's got a great talk about before you try to change the world, maybe clean your bedroom. Yeah. Clean your bedroom, clean your own room, make your bed. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Create your own order before you start trying to figure out, what everybody else should or shouldn't do.
Yeah. It's that small thing called integrity. Tell your kids to brush your teeth every morning, but they don't see you doing it. Like, Yeah, exactly. It's and there's a lot of that going on right now. There's a lot of people like that in the world. Yeah. And because it's easy and it's simple, and you can hide behind one of these all day long. Yeah. You don't have to look anyone in the face when you say something to them like we used to. Man, we didn't have social media when I was growing up. You said something to someone's face, they came up to you at your locker, and you're going to defend it now or not say it. It's like, hey, that whole you're going to get punched in the face, that's kind of a gone thing now. Because, someone will be anywhere in the world on one of these typing comments from a profile without a profile picture, and it's not even the real name, but nobody, feels the need to have to back up what they say or defend their argument intelligently, which is even harder for most people to do, I find. Yeah, but at the same time, I kind of think that at this point, it's kind of a sign of weakness as well to really care what anybody else says about anything, because just exactly like you said, you don't know who these people are. It could be some 12-year-old down in his basement just trying to see if he can't get a reaction. Half of them are. You know what I mean? just trolling you to see what your response would be, And a lot of times I think if we saw who it was that was saying that stuff, we would probably chuckle and probably want to give the kid a fist bump. You know what I mean? He's going, oh, here's a good one. You got me, or it was a fair question, and you almost kind of, sometimes I think, if we knew who they were, because they're hiding their, anonymously, but if you knew who they were, I think some of these people that are instigators like that, we would probably, a guy like you and me, we probably would have a lot more in common with them than we'd like to admit,
And they're probably the type of people that if they would listen to you, actually listen to what you had to say, could benefit tremendously and would, or needing something like that in their life, And
I'm not close to listening and hearing what someone has to say if they're opposing. They just better be able to defend it.
Yeah.
There's not going to be, these rumors or theories or, well, it's like, oh, well, I heard this. And then no, like what actually is, but, facts, that's called hate speech. So then, there's that.
But I think too, the other part of that is that's kind of the same way things are so much in our society right now is people don't take the time to form their own opinions. They haven't thought something through clearly themselves to come up with their own opinion. It's either one line or the other line. It's either black or it's white. It's this bumper sticker slogan or this thing that I'm repeating that so-and-so said, but nothing that they've clearly thought through themselves. Because I've had discussions with some people that have completely opposite or different opinions than I do on things, but I can have a discussion with them and we can discuss it clearly because they have actually formed their opinion. They know why they think what they think. I can completely disagree with them and think that they're totally wrong and think that I could prove them out as being wrong. But the reality is, at least I can respect them for the fact that they took some time and they investigated or they read some books or they did their due diligence in coming up with their cockamamie ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of people don't want to say this either, but there are a lot of things in life that are not black and white. There is a lot of gray area in this world. Yep. Now, I come from a more conservative Christian background. I'm definitely not a liberal, but I come from a more conservative background. And I'll admit, even in that community, I love so many people in that community, but so many people in that community as a whole, they see certain things as black and white. It's only this way. There is no other. No, man, I'm going to start putting you in the same camp as those far left extremists because you're not thinking either. You're just on the other end of the spectrum. Right. I've discovered personally, and not with everything, obviously, you can't say that, but with most issues, with most things, when you have two extreme opinions on opposite ends of the spectrum, the truth is usually somewhere in the middle. Almost always. Almost always. Now, we can't say that for everything. That's a very broad, general sweeping statement, but almost always. There is way more gray in the world than people on either side want to admit. And people they're so set in their absolutes. Yet so many of them are absolute or in their minds absolutely certain of that because they were told to be. And I'm not saying that things I'm not talking about absolute truth, relative truth. I'm not going there. That's not what I'm saying. I don't believe truth is quote unquote relative. I'm not one of those either. But there are certain things that are absolute in life. But I think it's a lot less than we tend to think. I think we like to think our opinions are the absolute ones. But if you go and you just sit and have a very, like you said, respectful conversation and intelligent conversation with somebody who might disagree with you, you might find things that you're realizing that you didn't know before. And it's altering your perspective a bit because you're getting a download of information and perspective that you didn't previously consider in your opinion. I do that a lot. And it's made me a lot more open-minded of a person. Not to say I'm right or they're wrong or whatever, but on top of just being a more well-informed person, or even if you're just trying to understand your enemy's argument so you can beat them better, that helps too, doing your homework on them, but knowing the opposing position's arguments. But at the same time, you actually find, I actually find that we're all way more alike than we are different. And we're screaming over the split hairs in society.
Yeah, well, things are pretty boring, and so we got to create some sort of conflict, right?
Exactly.
We got to come up with some kind of problem. Yeah. But I think too, one thing that I've seen, in the last few years is this idea that there's always people that say, well, no, there is only one truth. There's only one truth. You can't have your own truth. But I've started to understand the side of seeing your own truth is there is some reality there because you can only weigh and measure the world and life through the perspective that you were given, through the lens that you see life through, just because through your experience, through what you've gone through the people you've met, through your education, through what you see of the world. Not that there's not a true truth, but you also at the same time have to understand where some other people are coming from, because they're going to see things differently because they've experienced a completely different
their life experience has literally taught them different than yours has.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
you have to ask people, what do you mean by truth? Because there is personal truth. There is truth ultimately, like God, overall truth, life. But there is, like you said, personal truth. Here's a good example I use. Growing up, I didn't know a single black person who wasn't a criminal until I was 15 years old. The only ones I'd ever met up until that point were trying to jump me, steal my pegs off my bike, do whatever. So as a white kid, I just knew to stay away from those people. That's not a racist statement. That was my life experience. I'm like, hey, whenever they're around, like, I get in fights because they're trying to steal from me. Not that I wanted to believe they were all that way, but my life experience had taught me that. Flip that around. You have African Americans, let's say, who live in a big city, and cops are always coming through their neighborhood arresting people, and those cops happen to be white. Now they're growing up with their truth going, cops are bad, white cops are bad, they're always picking on black people. That's not totally true. It is in some cases, but it's not in all cases. We can't make these broad sweeping generalizations. But their personal truth, mine is like, no, cops are good. They're stopping bad guys. Well, I didn't come from their side of the tracks where, like, okay, maybe there's some crime going on. But when they were 6, all they knew was these people are like me, and these other people who don't look like us are hurting us. So that was, and then their parents and their neighbors reinforced that, and that was their truth. And so that goes back to what you're saying. I mean, you have to ask, whenever you're talking about truth, like, what do you mean by truth? Like, what kind of truth are you talking about? And, people on the conservative side often get hairy with that because, it's
real quick. There's only
one truth. And that's not what, calm down, people. It's like, that's not what we're debating here. Right. If you take a simple philosophy class, you'll understand that there are different kinds of truth. Scientific truth says it's probably 85 degrees in this room with all these studio lights on right now. That's called thermal, energy. That's the truth. But to someone else who may, be more hot natured, it might be only, 105 degrees in here. So, sorry, tangent over.
No, it's
you hit a good point there, though.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, it's because it's something that's bothered me, because like you said, I am more, Christian conservative end of the spectrum for sure. But that's something that immediately that snaps. I mean, it is like quick. Nope, there's only one truth. And it's like, whoa. You know what? If you're being closed-minded now too, let's at least have a look at what they mean by that. We can totally disagree.
Yeah.
I saw a thing years ago. I think it was just like an advertisement. It probably was for cigarettes or something like that. And it showed like this lone cowboy riding a fence line, like off into the sunset. And it just had like a caption of, if you want to hear a well-formed opinion, ask a cowboy. And
like
for
that.
Some reason, I mean, years and years, this was probably, 30 years ago, I saw this ad or something. It's still something I think about, because until you spend time with your opinion, until you spend time just thinking things through yourself, it's not your opinion, and it's not yours to hold on to really at all. And I've changed so many things or differed from so many different people that I respect in different circles, and come up with completely different ideas on things, and then later gone back and investigated more thoroughly, maybe by reading or by listening to, audiobooks or things like that, and come to go back and go, you know what? I was right on that. I differed from these other people that I respect, but I was right on that because of this and this and this, or this didn't quite sit right with me, or the way that the church taught this never quite sat right with me. And now all of a sudden, you're reading through your concordance or something like that, and you're like, yeah, that's nothing to do with it. A perfect example where it talks about in the Bible about the talents. You know, and for some reason, always growing up, they always wanted to go off on the tangent about it being about your talents and whether you're good at playing the piano or preaching or this and that. Those are
talk talents. About a breach of context, huh?
Exactly.
Lord,
it always seemed to go that direction, which was great for me because it always kind of let me off the hook because I was like, wow, there's no way I'll ever be a pastor, and I certainly can't sing or play the piano, so I don't even need to worry about that parable. And then, you
could actually know that they weren't talking about talents like we think of them nowadays in that parable. They weren't talking about that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then these things don't sit right with you, and years later, and you start to develop these different thoughts and stuff, and you read through and it's like, man, this story is so much more powerful if you look at it with what it truly is, that you've been given a whole lot. You better make good use of what you've been given, or where you're going to be spending eternity outside of the gate.
Yeah. Wayne Dyer had a great line. He had a lot of great lines. One thing he said, I heard a few months ago, I thought was absolutely great. He said, there's a difference between what you know and what you believe. He said, what you believe is what was handed to you. You were taught what to believe. He said, but what you know, it doesn't always line up with what you were taught to believe. You can believe one thing, but there's something in you sometimes where you just go, it's different than that. And I don't know why, but it's your personal knowledge of something, like based on your life experience, or it's just something, it's a knowing inside you. It's not your belief. It's just a knowing. And those things can be different.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't make that distinction. They'll sacrifice their gut instinct and what they feel on the inside, and they'll sacrifice that and then just let the belief that was put on them sometimes just cover it up, and they roll with it. And, to me, that's like a violation of your own personal integrity. You shouldn't be afraid to question anything. I don't believe so. I don't think there's any reason to be afraid to question anything about what we believe. I think the worst people who've done the worst things in the world are people who didn't question what they believed. They rolled with it, and it cost a lot of people.
Yep, agree 100%.
Whether it was from a religious or an atheistic side, like it's a principle.
Yep. Yeah, I was listening to something recently, and it was talking about basically the same thing you were saying, but it was even rolling into the fact that sometimes your belief, right, is contradictory to what you see or what you feel or what you smell at that given moment. And there's still people out there that rather than believe or change their belief to that newfound thing that's proven out right in front of them, stick with that belief. And there's a lot of that going on in the world today.
Yeah, it is. That tells you that people don't think factually. They don't think rationally. You can present facts to somebody like, this is a scientific fact. We know this, and they'll still argue. It's like, dude, I didn't make this up. Like, Like you jump off the 10-story building, the law of gravity is going to see to it that you hit the ground really hard. You don't have to believe in that. You can argue with me all day. Gravity doesn't exist. Like, okay, same kind of thing. And here's the dangerous thing about that. It's what this reveals is people don't follow facts. They follow narratives. Yep. Narrative is a story. People follow stories. That's why you never hear just the news talk about, boom, this happened. They go, breaking news. You wouldn't believe, outrageous, this and that, and they put their spin on it. They make this story because they have to outdo the other news station. It's all narratives. People follow narratives, and they get emotional. And people who can tell the most narratives will command people's attention. And that can be really bad. Hitler did that. And, there's people doing it in mass media, social media. And people, they'll defend their position of ignorance. Like, you can speak facts to them all you want, but I don't know if it's a majority, but in large part, people tend to follow narratives. And so you talked about story earlier and throughout this podcast. And that's one reason that's so important, is because when we communicate our message with a narrative structure, we can get more people to see the light from our perspective.
Yeah. And I think we better let it go at that. Brian,
we could go on that one, but we won't.
Yeah, I know. We could keep this going for a long time. We'll have to do this again sometime. But man, Brian, really, really great having a conversation with you. And why don't you share with everybody where they can find your stuff, and once again, and kind of give your details for everybody, and I'll also put them in the show notes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you want to learn more about what I do with speaking and writing, just go to blownupguy.com. Just remember, I'm a guy. I got blown up. Not the only guy, but I'm just the guy who thought it'd be funny. People kept forgetting my name, but they would say, "Hey, aren't you that guy who got blown up?" So I thought my infantry simple mind went, "Hey, they're calling you that guy who got blown up guy, blownupguy.com." So next time you're trying to find me or something to do with me, you go, "Oh, what's that guy's name who got blown up?" Boom, there it is, blownupguy.com. So that's where you can find what I do. And yeah, thanks for having me on. Let me know if I can help anybody in your life, with whatever I do, speaking, writing. If you have military veterans in your life, I speak a lot for the military, things like that, and do resilience training, talks for companies, things like that. And all that. It all came out of a really, really bad suicide bombing situation in my life. And I was open and I was willing, and I kept taking steps forward. And that's something that everybody can do who's listening to this, no matter what battle it is they're facing in their life right now.
Thanks again, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope that you got as much out of that conversation as I did. I hope that it was of value to you. If this podcast has been of value to you, I would appreciate you sharing this podcast, leaving a review from this podcast, and subscribing to this podcast. Those 3 little things can make a big impact on the future of this podcast. It would be greatly appreciated and make it much easier for me to continue in this venture moving forward. Along with this podcast, I do have a coaching program, and there are a lot of men out there, and I'm going to speak more on this in my next podcast episode, that you lived the scripted life, right? You went to school or the military, you got married, you had kids, you followed the script that was given to you from the moment you were born. And when you get to the end of that script, a lot of times you're looking around you wondering, what's next? Where do I go? I'm stuck. I'm not sure on what I need to do to move forward from this point. How do I live out the next 10, 15 years? Where am I going? What's my purpose? What's my drive? If that sounds like you, right now, as I mentioned in the last podcast, my website is down at the moment. It'll be back up soon, but it's down at the moment. You can email me at primjosephm@gmail.com. That's primjosephm@gmail.com. Put in the subject line coaching, and let's get on an hour conversation, and let's try to sort out where you are, what the script moving forward looks like for you. No strings attached. Let's have a conversation, and let's uncover the hero within. As always, men, hold fast, and God bless.